Peter Riva is the grandson of one of the most iconic actresses of all time, a trailblazer, a Renaissance woman, Marlene Dietrich. We met because of her, and she really did things that were way ahead of her time. She was sort of the Madonna of her age, and she did things that we're going to discuss today that you probably never knew, and Peter is going to enlighten us all. Let me bring on the great Peter Riva.
Hi,
hey,
Jesse.
man, you like that intro?
It's a little bit overblown, but that's okay.
That's what I'm here for.
It's overblown, not about her.
Your grandma was an amazing, amazing woman. And even on today's standards, the things that she did are mind-boggling. I mean, she pushed the envelope, the boundaries of what was acceptable, and she did it her way. How would you describe Marlene to people that are that have never really know her? You have a whole new audience watching this, a younger audience. Tell the viewers a little bit about Marlene that would help, enlighten them.
Well, the first thing you got to know about her is that she was totally self-driven. She wasn't ambitious at all. She only believed in excellence. And right from a young age, what she did is she concentrated her efforts to be as perfect as she could be in any field. Now, whether that be fashion, she was the number one person in as a fashion icon globally for 30, 40 years. Whether it be as a performer on stage or theater or to Allied troops in the war or in movies, whether it be an intellect that people had high regard for, whether it be Gorbachev, Reagan, Hemingway, you name it, they all, revered her intellect. And certainly as far as somebody who was fighting for the rights, the moral rights that are correct. In her day, because she was born before the First World War and her father died before the First World War, and then her stepfather died as a consequence of the First World War. So at the end of the First World War, when she's 17, 18, there were no men left, and Berlin was the most open city in the world. And you had a synagogue next to a Lutheran church, next to a Catholic church, next to a mosque. I mean, it was a city where all religions, all the arts were personified. Everybody thinks of Berlin as the place of Hitler. Hitler was a foreigner in Berlin. He was a southerner. He was from Bavaria. He's very much the southern type, as we know sometimes here. And the fact is that she grew up in this atmosphere of artistic integrity and openness. But right from the beginning, she realized that if the power didn't come from inside her, if she didn't exhibit the excellence that people were paying for and wanted, she was dishonest. And the one thing about her was total, absolute honesty about herself and about other people.
Well, that's the thing that I find incredible about her after researching all about her. We were talking, you and I, in a phone call yesterday about Black Lives Matter. And even back then, she was still pushing the envelope for racial equality. Why don't you tell the story about Pearl Bailey? Because that's an amazing story.
That's kind of fun. Well, the thing is, these people like Pearl Bailey and Marlene and Frank Sinatra and all of them, they toured continually and did what are known as concerts in various towns. And so I think Marlene was either in Dallas or Houston. I do get them confused at my age. And she was checking into the hotel, and Pearl Bailey had come from the airport at the same time as her. And so Pearl Bailey they were talking, and Marlene was checking in, and they had the fanciest suite there with the extra rooms for the maid and so on, which Marlene didn't need, but the producer had arranged. And Pearl Bailey then is checking in, and they inform her that there's unfortunately no room for her. And Marlene understood right away what they were saying. And so Marlene said, no, she's my friend. She's staying with me. Now, the hotel had already checked her in. They couldn't turn Marlene away. There would have been a scandal. So what happened is she checked in with Pearl Bailey, and they went up to the room, and she put Pearl Bailey in the main bedroom, and Marlene took the guest bedroom. And it went down not so well with the hotel, but she didn't give a damn. She was going to do the right thing. But, this always continued in her life. There was a famous incident when she first signed on to do a concert in the 60s in South Africa. And Marlon Brando was incensed. How dare you do this? He wrote her his letter with vitriol, that she shouldn't do it. Doesn't she understand what apartheid is and everything else? And of course, she knew perfectly well what apartheid was. So she wrote him a letter back that said, quote, "You take care of Texas, I'll take care of something."
Now, that's the thing. Now, here's another thing. I mean,
and when she went to South Africa, Jesse, don't forget, she only hired black musicians, which pissed everybody off down there. And because I had to go and buy the black socks at Harrods in London for her to be able to. These poor guys she was hiring didn't have the right socks, so she bought them socks. And she only hired black musicians. Every concert was sold out. Everybody got applause, and she would not take the applause unless the orchestra stood up. And Burt Bacharach and her were very brave in this way.
I read something where they asked her, why would you risk your life to go on, onto the front lines like that? And she had a German response. The word was aus Anstand, which means out of decency.
Yeah, I mean, look, you do what's right. That's the only way to keep the world sane is to.
But this is Hollywood. This is Hollywood. Most, the Madonnas of the world, who she, in a lot of the superficial ways, she was in those days. But she really gave. She cared. She had a heart. She had a heart.
But she knew. Look, she knew the difference between right and wrong. People say to me, "Oh my God, she had lesbian affairs." Hang on a second. Marlene would fall in love. Her, in a way, because of the war and everything that happened, she was a perpetual 18-year-old. She'd have these incredible "I'm in love with a song," "Isn't that the most beautiful baby you ever saw?" "This man is fabulous," "This woman is wonderful." For her, it was all about love. It was all about passion, and she gave to that. She referred to all the soldiers she sang to during the war and after in concerts as her boys. And there wasn't an ounce of her body that she didn't put into every performance because she owed it to them. They saved the world, and she was grateful to them always. And people said, well, when Madonna, I'll tell you a story, when Madonna saw that Marlene at the age of 65 was doing 64 conferences a year, Madonna said, "Is she out of her mind? I can't do 64 performances in a year. You can't do it." But Marlene did. And Burt Bacharach tell you the same thing. We have time in between going here and there. We can stop there and because there's soldiers there, and we can go and sing to them. And that's what was in Marlene's mind.
I remember Billy Wilder. Billy Wilder actually said that Marlene was on the front lines even more than Eisenhower.
Yeah, well, my father was in the Second World War, and he had more. You got a stripe every 6 months, and he had more stripes on his sleeve than pretty much anybody because he signed up early because he knew what was coming. And when he met Eisenhower in a salute parade and everything, Dad saluted and then touched his arm, and Eisenhower looked down and he went, "Yeah, I get it."
No, you talk about, the affairs. I mean, she was a man eater.
No, actually, no. The men were self-consumed. That's the problem. Marlene loved them for who they were at the time and never stopped caring for them. But she was never into possession. She was never into, he's mine, I'm hers. That was not her thing. It was, I love you, it's tender, it's loving, we're together, it's great. And then, oh, by the way, I like this better. I like this song today. Those flowers are fabulous. And the guys really couldn't take it, because
she had an independence. She was independent.
Totally.
She never took it as seriously as the men did. I mean, you talk about John Wayne and Gary Cooper and Sinatra.
Yeah, but John Wayne, my mother said to
John Wayne, Seven Sinners.
Yeah, but my mother said to John Wayne, "Were you ever?" And he said, "I didn't want to be part of a stable."
Sinatra was a very strong personality. Talk about Sinatra. I mean, what was that all about? Her relationship with Sinatra.
Well, because first of all, Sinatra gave Marlene something really important, and he was always sweet and tender. So their time together, physically, whatever, was a very tender time because he was very gentle with her. He had tremendous respect for what she did in the war. And when she wanted to go to Vegas and start performing, he knew that there were tricks he understood about Vegas that she didn't, that he had learned actually from Billie Holiday.
Ah.
And he would pass on to her the tips from Billie Holiday. And later on, Marlene took Dionne Warwick aside with Burt Bacharach and did the same thing with Dionne Warwick, taught her how to perform on stage, how to stand, how to dress, because she had the voice and she certainly had the range, but she didn't know how to perform. Marlene was a performer, and Frank understood that she was first and foremost a performer. People say to me, well, was Marlene a good actress? No, she was a great star. Perhaps one of the top 5 stars, female stars.
Isn't that
an
interesting thing that you're saying about actress and star? We don't really have stars anymore. She was a true star. Yeah, who would you say in today's environment?
Charlize Theron is a star. Yeah, she's not an actress. She keeps wanting to be an actress, but give it up. She's the camera and the medium adores her, and she knows how to fulfill that role perfectly. Now, is she broad enough to do other things? I'm not sure. Every once in a while, she does acting, and you say, yeah, it doesn't quite work.
Yeah,
but
I agree with that.
She is a great star. And if it was the Hollywood system, they'd be writing roles for her so that she could always be a star. They wrote roles for Marlene. They created what she needed to be a performer. Now, the other thing is this. Marlene started in motion pictures at a time when people were doing this. The gestures and all this kind of, Ponzi sort of stuff, because they came off the stage and they thought they have to make a gesture. Marlene knew that the more still she was, the more people would watch. So you watch her in the movies, she's very still. She's very deliberate in her movements because it makes you go to her. She understood the medium perfectly well. She loved television later on. She loved the radio, always adored that. She was great at that. And she would have been a fantastic director. She never got the chance.
Now, you mentioned Joe Kennedy. I know that she had affairs with both Joe and President Kennedy, with Jack.
She always claimed that she maybe did have something with JFK. My mother doubts it, but it could have been a little bit of a. See, Marlene knew my mother really liked JFK, and John was Mom and John were friends, and they, south of France, but he took her on her first date, my mother, so she was always very proud of that.
John Kennedy's first date was your mom?
Yeah, I know, but she was 16. What do you want to do? But I'll tell you,
underage.
Yeah. Oh, it was a date, not anything more.
Okay.
But I got to tell you a funny story about it. So, Mom's book, which I sent you the cover for, and I hope you share it with your audience.
Yes, we definitely will.
It's a fabulous book. It's one of the best biographies of Hollywood in that age you'll ever see. There's a very funny story. We were in Vienna promoting the book, and the publicist takes us in there to the hotel, the Imperial Hotel. And as we walk in, the manager of the hotel greets us, clicks his heels. First of all, my mother, the hairs on the back of her neck went up. The clicking of the heels thing, no. So he then takes us upstairs to show us the presidential suite, and he goes across this giant living room. Now, it's Vienna. Everything is schmaltz. It's white with gold or ormolu. And, oh, God. Anyway, he opens the balcony, and he said, "This is the balcony that Hitler stood on to welcome the troops." And my mother, like a pinball, is going straight out the door. I mean, she's just, that's it. I'm out of here. I'm not staying at this place, right? The manager realized he got the wrong person. He runs across the living room to the bedroom doors, throws them open, and says, "And this is the bed that John Kennedy slept in." My mother is at the door by this time. She turns like a pinball thing, doink, and she says, "I always wanted to sleep in John's bed."
Very good, very good. I look at this and I see all the names, but one of them that popped up in my research was Edith Piaf. And is that true?
Yeah. Oh, Edith Piaf was a damaged goods. She and Judy Garland, very similar in many ways. Judy had more drug problems than Edith had. Edith did alcohol. But both of them had a really rough childhood. And when they sang with an angst that other people didn't really capture. If you listen to Edith Piaf carefully, she's crying inside every
Oh
time she.
yeah, I agree with that, definitely.
And Marlene looked at her like a long lost soul. You know, at one point she said she's like a refugee within her own country. It's a really
Wow.
interesting turn of phrase.
Wow.
And so, they were friends, and Marlene would share tips with her because Marlene had done a lot of stage work before Edith did, and they were pals. Were they more than that? Yeah, maybe. You know, just affectionate, but it's not a sexual thing. Marlene wasn't very sexual. She was very much about loving and passion and being together. You know, one of her favorite partners was Yul Brynner because he just wanted, after he came off of the stage on Broadway doing King and I, he was so tired she would just hold him in her arms and they'd sleep all night. That was perfect for her.
She had quite a heart, and you know, and this is I'm going to share with the audience how you and I met in 1991, I think it was.
Yeah.
She was living in Paris. She had been there almost 12 years at that time, and these, I guess they were hairstylists who came in and they broke in at 1 a.m. in the morning, and they tried to photograph her, and suddenly you and I were thrust together to try to stop them from breaking because she didn't want the public she wanted the public to remember her in her prime and to put those types of photographs.
But she owed it to them. That for her, there wasn't any vanity. She didn't give a damn what she looked like. She cared about what other people, their image would be spoiled. Why ruin it for somebody? That to her was a terrible punishment for people who were loving and kind and needed that image of her. You know, we have 220,000 followers on Facebook. Why? Because she fulfilled a need, and she still fulfills that need for people, and that's a wonderful thing.
Well, it's amazing also that incident, it really put her in the front page headlines again and reinvented her for a whole new audience. And then Maria's biography came out right after that, after she passed.
Well, Marlene always knew that my mother was going to write the biography. My mother was trained from a very young age to remember everything. After a dinner at their house, even before she went to Hollywood, this is in Berlin, when my mother was 5 and 6, Marlene or my grandfather, Rudolph, we called him Poppy, would come to my mother's bedroom to tuck her in and say, now tell us exactly who said what at dinner and what did they say. And my mother had to recount them. You know, it's a funny story because Bill Paley, the founder of CBS, told me at dinner 20, 30 years ago now, he said, Maria was my favorite actress on television in the early 50s. And I said, oh, that's a nice thing to say, but why? And he said, are you kidding? We'd call her up on Tuesday and tell her we have a live performance on Thursday night, dress rehearsal on Wednesday. Can you be ready? She came in, she knew every word, everything. She never forgot a line, ever, never. 67 live teleplays with her. She never forgot a line. She was always there because she was trained for it. And when she wrote the book, which Marlene knew she was writing and everything. And of course,
but she waited to Marlene passed to put it out, right? I mean,
to publish it, of course, because why would you punish somebody with? There were elements in the book that Marlene saw differently and was allowed to, as an older woman, see her life the way she wanted it to be. There's nothing wrong with that.
But this was no mother. This was no mommy dearest. I mean,
no. No. I mean, look.
There were three things my
mother believes in history. If you don't learn from history, you screw up again and again. Look at the times we're in. And the fact is that everything in the book is historically accurate. Everything. In fact, it's so accurate that Knopf, before they published it, they assigned fact checkers. And after 3 weeks, they came back with, well, we found a mistake on page. And you described that China on the Normandy was having a fluted edge, but it was still, the Art Deco thing. And my mother said, no, you're confusing two things. I'm writing about March. The China didn't change until September that year.
Oh, my God. So she knew her history.
And here's the other thing, the kicker. This is really interesting. We all figured that Mom recreated the dialogue in the book between all these very famous people from memory, and it's accurate, we thought, because Mom is not a liar, so that's fine. What we didn't know is after Marlene passed, the book was in the safe, locked down, not to be touched. When Marlene passed away, I was in charge of rounding up all the storage around the world and finding a home for it. In Paris, there were two large almost pallet-sized wooden boxes with things that she and Poppy had put in storage in 1939.
And hadn't been
never
opened
been
since
opened.
then? Wow.
No, never opened.
Wow.
So when we opened it, we found all these letters from all these famous people. So eventually,
who were some of the people that were in there?
Virtual who's who in Hollywood and Europe at the time. I mean, everything from the royal family in England to every director, actor you can think of. I mean, it's just, reams, because at the time people wrote letters and they were all kept. So everything from Hemingway to, well, not at that time, Hemingway was after, but everything from, all her lovers and the directors and the studio and all that, which it's about the preeminent art form of the 20th century. Anyway, when all that material, I think total was 35,000 bits of correspondence, 35,000.
35,000 letters? Oh, so my God.
All this went to Berlin and is in the museum there. I'll tell you why it went to Berlin in a second. 2 years later, they call us and they say, Peter, you know Maria's book? I said, yeah. We've been fact-checking Maria's book. And I said, okay. We're a little worried. And I said, what do you mean? We know these letters were in Paris in boxes that hadn't been opened. How is it that Maria knew what was in the letters? Did she have a copy somehow? And I said, what do you mean? They said the dialogue is lifted from the letters, word for word. Every word that's in the letter, in the book, is in the letters. There's nothing there that's inaccurate, maybe a comma or something, but
so how did that happen?
Mother's memory, mom's photographic memory.
Wow.
She was trained to do it, and she can do it.
Unbelievable.
And it was interesting because she was on German TV, and Max Kolpe, who was a songwriter and a friend of Marlene's, he said to Maria, I've known you since you're a little girl. You couldn't have written this book. It's a fantastic book. Who wrote it with you? Mom said, I did. And he said, but Maria. So she said to him, Max, this is live TV. Let me assure you. And she quoted 3 pages of the book to him about him, word for word. And Max stood there and went, okay, I think maybe you did write it in German. She said, no, I wrote it in English and translated it into German. And he said, well, that's why it's Hochdeutsch. Mom doesn't speak modern German. She speaks the old German.
Right.
More formal German.
Tell the audience the name of the book so that they know where to buy. Where can they buy it?
Yeah, you can buy it at Barnes & Noble, Amazon, wherever you want. It was originally issued by Knopf, and then we've reissued it recently at a lower price point, of course, with Pegasus, the publishers. And it's Marlene Dietrich by Maria Riva. It's a fascinating biography of a time and a place that is no more. And it really documents the preeminent art form of the 20th century in the Hollywood studio system in a way that other people had never seen before. Marlene was fastidious about the costumes. They had to be perfect. The lighting had to be perfect. The cameraman had to be perfect. She was really in control of her image as a performer. Orson Welles, he did a movie with her in the 50s, which I'm now having a senior moment forgetting the name of, but it's the only movie he made with her.
I have it written down here.
Okay, good.
I did my homework. Orson Welles, the
Touch of Evil.
Touch of Evil, but he also taught her a little trick that she did in public, how to mind read.
Oh yeah, well, the sawing in half thing, that she loved that. Well, again, that was a fundraiser. She would do anything fundraising for the troops. She would do willingly. My mother was doing cerebral palsy, and Marlene was still raising money for veterans and the troops.
Wow.
Her respect for the soldiers and her duty to the soldiers and what she felt was her debt to the soldiers, British, American, French, Polish, whoever fought the Nazis, and of course the soldiers who went out to the Pacific Theater. Her debt never diminished to the day she died. Never diminished.
Amazing. And now you're also an author, aren't you? You were also an agent. You're a book agent.
Well, as you know, I worked with Peter Beard for a lot of years, and I spent a fair amount of time in Africa over 20 years. And I also produced some 78 one-hour documentaries with my partner Bert Van Munster, who has gone on to create The Amazing Race with his wife.
When was the last time you spoke with Peter? Because I know, it was horrible the way he just passed away. Not surprising, though.
Yeah, well, Peter, Peter's Peter.
Wild man.
Peter was a great guy to be with when you were with him, but when you weren't with him, you were out of sight, out of mind. And that's okay. He had his own thing to do, and there's no question of how creative he was and everything. I just wish that, as his mother said to my wife and I over lunch a few times, I just wish he'd, realize where loyalty is and where it's a better thing to be a grown-up than a child. But on the other hand, his Peter Pan quality kept him interested in women.
Definitely
certainly had a lot of them.
He definitely was a child, and he definitely had a lot of women. I was around him many times in New York. And you have a book yourself, right? You have a book that's out?
I've done 3 books about based on a television producer and his sidekick best friend Mbuno.
The name of the book?
Who's got you have Murder on Safari, you have Berlin Package, and then you have Kidnapped on Safari.
I've been on safari. I've done over 200 safari runs. If you Google Jesse Nash, 14 Lions versus Elephant, you will see one of the greatest safari sightings ever.
Cool. I will do so as soon as we get off the air.
You must do it. You must do it.
Yeah. I hope I'll send you my book. I'm sorry I haven't done that. I'll send it to you because it's a page turner. It's fun reading. And what's great is Mbuno was a guy I got to know. In true story, Mbuno was a real person. Of course, I've made the story that's fiction, but the background of Mbuno and everything that's in the book is accurate. It's what he told me about himself and his father and their relationship to elephants. And it plays out in every story. Mbuno would judge humans as animals. And he would say, that person's like this, that person's like that. And he would assess their character as if they were a certain type of animal. And I use that in the book as part of the thriller aspect, that he's able to unravel things that the television producer and his crew are not able to do without him. So it's kind of a fun story of trip through Africa.
Now, to wrap this up, since we're talking so much about Marlene, I'd like to know, what parting comment could you give the viewers, the people that aren't familiar? What movies should they watch to get acquainted with her? And how would you describe her in today's world? What would you say in reference as something as a parting description of this amazing, amazing person?
Well, being the first actor or actress ever to get a percentage of gross of the movies she made, and those royalties still come in for the family, which is nice. Not much, but it's there. Unto thine own self be true, the Shakespeare saying applies to her. She never did anything out of vanity. She did things out of what she thought was right and the right way to go about living. And you do it with passion and compassion. And you do it in a way that brings benefit to the people around you. Some people have said to me that, gosh, she didn't suffer fools. I said, no, you haven't understood. If she saw somebody was doing something incorrectly, she would correct them so that they would know how to do it better, so that they themselves would be better. So she
Wow.
was a demanding taskmaster, but not out of a position of superiority, but out of a position of, he doesn't know any better. I got to show him. If you go into the kitchen, you don't know how to make a beignet, or you don't know how to make an omelet properly, she'll show you how to do an omelet. That's who she was. Because she had a respect for her fellow beings. And the great thing about her in the motion picture industry, and if you want to see some films which are really pivotal, Destry Rides, again, is a romp. It's a good film. It's a lot of fun. It's a woman who is enjoying being American to the core, and she knows the war is coming, and she's going to be as American as she can be, and it's fun. On the other hand, if you see Judgment at Nuremberg, which is a Stanley Kramer movie, she has to play her mother in that picture. She threw up regularly playing her mother, although her mother wasn't a pro-Nazi person, but that sort of staunch person of, we didn't know. How could we possibly know this was going on? And Spencer Tracy says, you knew. And of course, Marlene, to say the words, we didn't know, she knew that was a total lie. Or self-delusion. Somebody who was, pretending they didn't know. And
it had to be so personal for her because,
Oh my God, it was a hard role, but she did a brilliant job.
Yeah.
But, if you see only one movie, see Morocco. Mm-hmm. This is a movie, the first movie she made in America, first movie released in America, and she has a love affair with Gary Cooper in the movie, but she plays it as a woman who is totally, absolutely self-contained and self-able to do what she wants to do, including wearing a man's tuxedo. Now, 1931, a woman wearing a man's tuxedo, this is bad news. And then she kisses a woman when she's wearing the tuxedo. Big scandal. Her attitude was, deal with it.
Almost 100 years before now, and she was pushing it then. Peter Riva.
Jesse, I know you want to go, but let me give you one quick thing.
Go ahead.
She was coming over to France, and the prefect of police had warned her that if she shows up in men's attire, she's going to be arrested because it was against the law in Paris. She said, "Oh, really? Okay." So she put on her most mannish suit, got off the boat train in the Gare du Nord, and was greeted by the press and everything else, and the police who came, and there she is dressed as a man walking down the platform. They didn't dare arrest her. And the next day, he sent her a bracelet as an apology with his inscription on it, apologies.
Wow. I'm telling you,
she was like a queen, and today you don't really have that anymore.
No.
It's
and you know what? She did it with integrity. And that's the word integrity in our society is something that you really need to earn, and she earned it. Peter Riva, thank you so much for this episode. What a fascinating trip down memory lane, and what an insight into a great woman and a legend. Marlene Dietrich, Peter Riva, Conspiracy Theories and Coffee, The Alarmist. It was a great show.
Thank you, Jesse. It's a great show. I enjoyed it.
Thank you so much. Stay safe. To be continued. All right, man.
Okay,
bye.